Hi guys, welcome to our channel Share Experience. In this video, we are going to learn how to prepare trading profit and loss account and balance sheet with some adjustments. Balance sheet is the final step in preparation of final accounts. In trading account preparation video, we spoke about the introduction of final accounts. If you guys have not watched that video, please watch it so that you can understand this concept very well. I'll leave the link in the below description box. First, we'll see why we need to prepare balance sheet. In our last video, we have calculated gross profit and net profit for our XYZ company by preparing trading and profit and loss account. For those accounts, we have considered all expenses and incomes except business owner and business partner's personal expenses. Now we will find our company's financial position by considering all assets, liabilities, net profit, owners and business partners' expenses by preparing the balance sheet. There are some points that we need to remember. Those are: balance sheet is a statement and it is not an account. Unlike other accounts in the sense like trading profit and loss account and other ledger accounts, balance sheet doesn't have a debit side and credit side. We don't have to mention to and by on the debit side and credit side in the statement. Also note, balance sheet is not prepared for a particular period. It is prepared on a particular date. Therefore, balance sheet gives us the financial position of a firm on a given date. The headings in the balance sheet are liabilities and assets. Liability is something a person or a company owes. Asset is a property owned by the company. Usually we write liabilities on the left hand side and assets on the right hand side in the balance sheet. The totals of liabilities and assets should match with each other always. As I said earlier, the personal expense of owner or other business partners will be considered while preparing balance sheet and not in the P&L account, that is profit and loss account. Now we'll see the proforma for balance sheet. In this proforma, we have 4 columns. Those are liabilities, amounts, assets, amounts. In the liabilities column, we'll mention all the liabilities like sundry creditors, bills payable, bank overdraft, loans, mortgage. So, the sundry creditors, bills payable, bank overdraft, loans and mortgages comes under loans. Apart from all kinds of loans, we also mention owner's capital, owner's personal expenses, that is nothing but drawings, and net profit, income tax and reserve fund in the liabilities side. Here we will add net profit to the owner's capital, and from that total amount we will deduct drawings and income tax. Now we will arrive at the total amount on the liabilities side. On the asset side, we will mention all assets of the business like cash in hand, cash at bank, bills receivables, sundry debtors, closing stock, investments, furniture and fittings, loose tools, plant and machinery, horses and carts, land and buildings, freehold or leasehold lands, business premises, patents and trademarks, and also goodwill. All these are considered as assets. In other words, assets means these are the valuable things that are owned by the business. We need to add all the amounts on the asset side to arrive at the total amount, and both the totals on the asset side and liability side should match with each other. Now we'll see the problem. In this problem, we have 6 adjustments. Before preparing trading profit and loss and balance sheet, first we will see calculations for these adjustments, and then we will prepare trading profit and loss account and balance sheet. Here I just want to make one point. Most of us don't know what exactly the adjustments are. Adjustments are like if there is an outstanding payment that we have to pay but we did not pay, and there is some wrong entry and we are trying to rectify it. An expense paid in advance and creating a provision. Here provision means if you have a doubt on any debtors whether they are going to pay the amount or not. In this situation we create provision. All these adjustment entries have not gone through journal process. So that is, first we pass journal, then we post into ledger, then we prepare trial balance. So adjustments are not part of trial balance. That is the reason we post them directly into trading profit and loss account and balance sheet. There is no defined rule for any adjustments. According to the transaction, we will identify where to place the adjustment accounts. Now we will discuss the adjustments one by one. Our first adjustment is stock on hand on 30th September 2020 is rupees 13,600. Stock on 30th September 2020 is nothing but our closing stock. If we see month and date before stock, then presume that it is closing stock. If we see beginning of the month date like 1st September, then we will presume that it is opening stock. As usual, we will mention closing stock on the credit side of the trading account and asset side of the balance sheet. The reason for mentioning on the credit side of the trading account is we are preparing trading account to ascertain gross profit and gross loss. Closing stock is a leftover stock of finished goods. So, we are mentioning on the credit side of the trading account. The reason for mentioning on the asset side of the balance sheet is closing stock is an asset which is still with the business. So we have to mention closing stock in the asset side of the balance sheet. Our next adjustment is machinery is to be depreciated at the rate of 10% and patents at the rate of 20%. Depreciation is a reduction in the value of an asset over time due to wear and tear. Depreciation is always considered as an expense. If you want to know the expense classification, please watch profit and loss account video. In that I have given the expense chart. In the trading profit and loss account, we will mention all expenses on the debit side and all incomes on the credit side. So, we will mention in the debit side of the profit and loss account. So, we will show depreciation in the debit side of the profit and loss account. Since we are providing depreciation on asset, we will show it on the asset side in the balance sheet. Our next adjustment is salaries for the month of August 2020, amount rupees 3,000 were unpaid. So these are outstanding salaries. Salaries are always considered as expense. In the trading profit and loss account, we will mention all expenses on the debit side and all incomes on the credit side. So we will show salaries and outstanding salaries in the debit side of the profit and loss account. Since we are liable to pay the outstanding salaries, we will show it on the liability side of the balance sheet. Our next adjustment is insurance includes a premium of rupees 170 for next year. That means we have paid in advance. Insurance is always considered as an expense. So we will show it in the debit side of the profit and loss account. Since these are paid in advance, we don't have to pay it in future again. So we will show this in the asset side of the balance sheet. Our next adjustment is wages include a sum of rupees 4,000 spent on the erection of cycle shed for employees and customers. This adjustment states to rectify the entry. Instead of creating renovation expense for the buildings, we have wrongly added this expense to wages. So therefore, to correct the entry, we are debiting the wages account, which is an expense, and we'll show it in the debit side of the trading account. Since this transaction has an impact on the building's value, the building is an asset, so we will show it on the asset side of the balance sheet. Our next adjustment is provision for bad and doubtful debts is created to the extent of 5% on sundry debtors. Sundry debtors are customers who bought the goods from us or from the proprietor on credit basis. Bad debts are treated as expense because when the business owner suspects that the customer is not going to pay the amount to the seller for the products that he purchased. So we will show bad debts on the debit side of the profit and loss account. Since we are creating the provision for bad debts and this has a negative impact on sundry debtors, we will show it on the asset side of the balance sheet and deduct this doubtful debts amount from the amount that we should receive from the sundry debtors. Don't worry, I will explain it further in the calculations part. Till here we have understood the placement of adjustments in trading profit and loss account and balance sheet. Now we will see the workings or calculations of these adjustments. Then we will prepare trading profit and loss account and balance sheet. Our first adjustment is related to closing stock. That is, stock on hand on 30th September 2020 is rupees 13,600. As discussed earlier, we will mention the closing stock on the credit side of the trading account as by closing stock and the amount is 13,600. Now we will mention the same in the asset side of the balance sheet. As I said earlier, we don't use debit and credit or to and by in balance sheet. Our next adjustment is related to machinery. Machinery is to be depreciated at the rate of 10% and patents at the rate of 20%. Here in our problem, machinery amount is 40,000 and the rate of depreciation is 10%, which comes to 4,000. Depreciation is considered as a financial expense, not a manufacturing expense. So we will mention 2 depreciation of machinery in the profit and loss account on the debit side and mention 4,000 in the amount column. Then in the balance sheet on the asset side we will mention machinery and rupees 40,000 in the inner column because machinery is an asset. Below machinery account in the balance sheet itself we will mention depreciation with minus and the amount is 4,000. That is 10% of 40,000 and we will deduct 4,000 from 40,000 which comes to 36,000. We will mention this amount in the outer column. We should use minus sign or plus sign to indicate whether we are deducting the amount or adding the amount. The reason we are deducting the depreciation from the asset account is to show the current value of the asset. Now similarly we have to do it for patents. Here in the problem, patents amount is 15,000 and the rate of depreciation is 20%, which comes to 3,000. Now we will mention 2 depreciation on patents in the profit and loss account on the debit side and mention 3,000 in the outer column. Then in the balance sheet on the asset side we will mention patents and in the amount column 15,000 inner column. Below patents in the balance sheet itself we will mention depreciation with a minus sign and deduct 3,000 from 15,000 which comes to 12,000. We will mention it in the outer column. Here also we are showing the current value of the asset. Our next adjustment is salaries for the month of August 2020 amount rupees 3,000 were unpaid. Here in the problem salaries amount is 30,000 and salaries is considered as an office expense. So we will mention 2 salaries in the debit side of the profit and loss account and 30,000 in the inner column on the debit side. Below salaries in the same statement itself we will mention outstanding salaries with a plus sign and add 3,000 to 30,000, which comes to 33,000. Now we will mention 33,000 in the outer column. Since the outstanding salary is a liability that needs to be paid to the employees, we will mention outstanding salaries on the liability side of the balance sheet and mention 3,000 in the amount column because only 3,000 is outstanding. Our next adjustment is insurance includes a premium of rupees 170 for next year. Here in the problem, insurance amount is 1,200. So, insurance is considered as a financial expense. We will mention insurance in the debit side of the profit and loss account as to insurance, and in the inner column we will mention 1,200. Below insurance in the same column we will mention prepaid insurance with a minus sign and deduct the prepaid insurance amount from insurance amount, that is 170. Now we will deduct 170 from 1,200, which comes to 1,030. We will mention this amount in the outer column. Now on the asset side of the balance sheet, we will mention prepaid insurance and we will mention 170 in the amount column. Since 170 is paid in advance, prepaid insurance is considered as an asset because we don't have to pay it in the future. Our next adjustment is wages include a sum of 4,000 spent on the erection of cycle shed for employees and customers. This means incorrect expenses added to wages. Wages is a manufacturing expense, so we will mention it in the trading account as 2 wages in the particulars column and the amount is 20,960 on the debit side of the trading account. Below that we will mention erection of cycle shed with a minus sign and the amount is 4,000. Now we will deduct the wrongly added amount, that is 4,000 from wages amount, that is 20,960 minus 4,000, which comes to 16,960. Now we will mention this amount in the outer column. For the same adjustment, we will find the buildings amount in the trial balance, that is 60,000. Then we will mention buildings on the asset side of the balance sheet and mention 60,000 in the amount column, that is inner column. Since we already have an adjustment, that is erection of cycle shed for employees and customers, we will mention this in the asset side of the balance sheet with a plus sign and the amount is 4,000. Then add 4,000 to 60,000, that comes to 64,000. Now we will mention the 64,000 in the outer column. Our last adjustment is provision for bad and doubtful debts is to be created to the extent of 5% on sundry debtors. Provision is always considered as expense, so we will mention 2 provision for bad debts in the profit and loss account on the debit side. And in the amount column we will mention 1,450, that is 5% on sundry debtors amount. In other words, we can say 5% on 29,000, which comes to 1,450. In the balance sheet, asset side we will mention sundry debtors and the amount column, in the amount column we will mention 29,000 because sundry debtors are considered as an asset. Below sundry debtors, in the same column itself, we will mention provision for bad debts with a minus sign. And the amount is 1450. Now we will deduct bad debts amount from sundry debtors, that is 29,000 minus 1450, which comes to 27,550. We will mention this in the outer column. The reason we are deducting this amount from sundry debtors is because we assume that this amount from sundry debtors we may or may not receive in the future. Now we are done with the calculations part. Now we will see how to prepare trading profit and loss account and balance sheet along with the adjustments. To make things clear, I have used different colors to identify trading profit and loss account and balance sheet. Yellow is for trading account, green is for profit and loss account, and orange is for balance sheet. I have made a separate videos on trading account and profit and loss account. Please watch it to understand these two accounts better. I will leave the link in the description box. As we discussed earlier, while preparing trading account, opening stock, purchases, purchase returns will come on the debit side, and sales returns, closing stock will come under credit side. Now we will update the respective amounts for these items. Our first account is opening stock. Here opening stock amount is 11,520. We will mention 11,520 in the outer column on the debit side. Next account is purchases and the amount is 81,350. We will mention this in the inner column on the debit side. And we will deduct purchase returns amount from purchases, that is 81,350 minus 1000, which comes to 80,350. Now we will mention 80,350 in the outer column on the debit side. Written outwards is nothing but purchase returns. Now on the credit side we will mention sales amount, that is 1,97,560 in the inner column, and sales return amount is 1,360. Here written inwards is nothing but sales returns. Now we will deduct sales returns amount from sales, that is 1,97,560 minus 1,360, which comes to 1,96,200. Now we will mention 1,96,200 in the outer column on the credit side. Here we have closing stock amount in the adjustments, that is 13,600. We will mention 13,600 in the outer column on the credit side. Our next accounts for trading account are wages, carriage on purchases, fuel and power. In this problem, we have an adjustment for wages. We have already prepared the workings for wages. So we will copy the same thing from previous tab and paste it in this tab. Now we will mention two fuel and powers in the debit side of the trading account and mention 9,460 in the outer column. Our next account for trading account is carriage on purchases. Now we will mention two carriage on purchases on the debit side of the trading account, and in the outer column we will mention 4,080. Now we will total the amounts on both the sides. As per balancing rule, we will mention the highest amount on both the sides here. The credit side has the highest amount, that is 2,09,800. So we will mention 2,09,800 on both the sides. Now we will deduct the debit total amount from credit total amount, that is 2,09,800 minus 1,22,370, which comes to 87,430. We'll mention this amount as to gross profit carried down on the debit side. Since credit side total is greater than debit side, we are mentioning as gross profit. If the debit side total is greater than credit side, then we'll mention as by gross loss on the credit side. In other words, we can say sales is more than purchases and expenses. Hence, we arrived at gross profit. If sales is less, then it will be gross loss. Now we'll mention this amount as by gross profit brought down on the credit side of the trading account. And we'll mention 87,430 in the outer column on credit side. Till here we have prepared trading account. Now we'll prepare profit and loss account. In this problem, we have 4 accounts highlighted in green color that comes under office expenses. Those are carriage on sales, that is 6,400, and salaries, that is 30,000. General expenses 6,000. Insurance 1,200. For salaries and insurance, we have adjustments. We'll copy the data for these items from the working tab and paste it here. In the adjustments, we have depreciation and provision for bad debts. Even for those accounts, we will copy the data from working tab and paste it here. Now there are only 2 items left. Those are carriage on sales and general expenses. For carriage on sales, we don't have any adjustments. So we'll mention 2 carriage on sales on the debit side of the profit and loss account. And in the outer column, we'll mention 6,400. For general expenses too, we don't have any adjustments. So we'll mention 2 general expenses in the debit side of the profit and loss account and mention 6,000 in the outer column. Now we'll add amounts on both the sides. Here also we have the highest amount on credit side, that is 87,430. So we'll mention 87,430 on both the sides. Now we'll deduct debit side total amount from credit side total amount, that is 87,430 minus 54,880. We'll get 32,550. Now we'll mention 32,550 in the outer column on the debit side. And we'll mention as to net profit. Here we have highest amount on credit side, so we say this as to net profit. If the highest amount is on debit side, then we call it as by net loss. Till here we have completed profit and loss account. Now we will prepare balance sheet. In this problem, I have colored balance sheet accounts in orange color. Those are cash in hand, cash at bank, buildings, freehold land, machinery, patents, capital, sundry debtors, sundry creditors and drawings. We have adjustments for buildings, machinery, patents, sundry debtors and closing stock, and also insurance for asset side. First adjustment is buildings. So we'll copy the data for buildings from working tab. Our next adjustment is machinery. We'll copy the data for machinery from the calculations tab. Here I have copied the data for both together, that is machinery and patents. Our next adjustment is sundry debtors. So we'll copy the data for sundry debtors from the calculations tab. Our next adjustment is closing stock amount. We'll copy the closing stock amount from the working tab. Our last adjustment on the asset side is insurance. I will copy that also from the working tab. Now we'll see the accounts that don't have any adjustments for asset side. Those are cash in hand, cash at bank and freehold land. Now we'll mention these on the asset side of the balance sheet along with their respective amounts in the outer column. Till here we have copied the data for assets and also we have mentioned accounts which don't have any adjustments. Now we'll copy the data for liabilities. Under liabilities side we have adjustments related to outstanding salaries. So we'll copy the data from the working tab. We don't have any adjustment for sundry creditors. So we will mention sundry creditors on the liability side and its respective amount in the outer column. Creditors come under liability because as company has purchased goods on credit basis and company need to pay for it in the future. That is why we are mentioning creditors under liability side. Now we are left with only two accounts. Those are capital and drawings. First we'll mention capital on the liability side and the amount is 1,42,000 in the inner column. Below that we'll mention net profit with a plus sign. Remember to add net profit to capital in the liability side of the balance sheet. That is 32,550. Now we'll mention drawings below net profit. Now we should add net profit to capital in the inner column itself, which comes to 1,74,550. Now we will mention drawings below net profit with a minus sign and the amount is 10,490. Now we will deduct 10,490 from 1,74,550, which comes to 1,64,060. Now we will add all these items on both the sides. Both the sides should match with each other. Here the total on both the sides is 1,79,660. This is matching. So our balance sheet is completed. If it is not matching, that means you have missed out any adjustment somewhere or miscalculated the adjustment. You need to rectify it and then make sure the totals on the asset side and liability side are matching with each other. If you have any questions, please post in the comment section below. If you guys like my explanation, please don't forget to subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon. Thanks a lot for watching this video.